What's going on, y'all? KMBest here. Let's take a look at the best decks to climb in Marvel Snap. It's a little bit difficult to pick exactly one Thanos list to sit on top of the tier list, because I do think that it's very clear that Thanos Fractured Frontier has and is defining the metagame right now. But this is a very powerful list from Andre Var, a slight modification of the Aurora Thanos list to get Echo in there to help protect you from Cosmo and maybe occasionally also help beat out the Scorpion combo deck. This is a very strong list that has a lot of ability to combo off in certain matchups, to play a mid-range game in certain matchups with relevant tech cards, and generally to be a powerful point output deck in most situations. I think it's probably the safest choice of the Thanos lists because it has the most flexible game plan that allows it to modify itself to whatever you really particularly are trying to beat. There are flex slots. They're cheap flex slots, right? Like Luke Cage is a flex slot, and it might be that you have to swap him out for a Mobius or for something along the lines of a Mercury if those are the things you're worried about trying to beat. But this is still a deck that has a ton of power in the shell. It's probably the safest, strongest mid-range deck in the game, and I would argue that it would be a little disingenuous to start this list talking about anything but Thanos Fractured Frontier. He is extremely powerful, although it is becoming clear that there are some pretty clear directions you can go if you're trying to beat him. The first thing is happening in Thanos decks themselves, which is to say that one of the most immediate reactions to Thanos was to put him in small ball mid-range decks where he is the biggest guy in those decks. And people are figuring out that if you cheat a bunch of energy, what you can do is go bigger than those small ball mid-range decks while also being a Thanos list. This list from Hannah's Cat Cafe finished second in the Golden Gauntlet, and I think it's a good example of the directions people are trying to take with this card. There are a couple of basic things going on, but a lot of the level 1 Thanos decks do not go super tall. They're about scalers to facilitate Thanos getting shots. They're less about being able to play a bunch of big guys. And so if you're a Thanos deck that's playing a bunch of big guys, you can just outdo them on raw value here. And that is sort of the direction that this Thanos list is going in. Being able to cheat cards out with Sabah Nur, being able to get a Mockingbird extremely cheap. There are a bunch of different builds of this, but largely what I've seen in the Thanos space is people getting cheatier. Here's an example of as cheaty a Thanos list as you can put together. This is a pixie version of a zombies Thanos list. The basic premise here is simple. We're going to do something combo-y in our Thanos decks, and our opponents who are playing Batroc are not going to be able to keep up with our combo stuff in our Thanos decks. It actually is that simple. Cards to highlight here are Psylocke, Fractured Frontier, and Thanos' Greenstone. What you're doing with this deck is trying to stack those buffs, which is part of why I think the double Thanos list works so well. Because it can play a Mobius, it can sort of be a big Thanos list that has good game into the very cheaty Thanos list, like this one with Pixie and multiple Sarah-style effects for your hand. You're going to be able to stop them from doing that when they're playing a deck like this, but if the people that you're playing against are not playing Mobius, a deck like this is going to kind of run them over. And to finish up the Thanos stuff, yes, you could still play it in Batroc, but I do think that this is sort of very specifically the deck that every other Thanos deck that I've talked about here is working to beat. The target on its back is extremely, extremely large, and the general metagame dynamics are forcing things to go away from this kind of space and more towards a combo-style Thanos deck, and also all the other decks that are trying to beat Thanos are just combo decks full stop. And the Batroc Thanos deck giving up things like Juggernaut is meaningful in terms of its matchup, not just into the more combo-y Thanos decks, but into the actual combo decks, which is about to be the next section of this conversation. Scorpion Brand New Day is still likely the premier combo deck of this metagame. It is perhaps the strongest in terms of absolute value of points that it will create. This is a deck that is going to effectively generate massive amounts of points through copying Scorpion Brand New Day's ongoing ability from either the use of Mystique, Prodigy, or of course the Ancient One's Tau Mandala. This is a relatively telegraphed line of play, and you do see some of the more over-the-top versions of this deck where their playlines can be disrupted by things like Cosmo and Juggernaut, not necessarily falling victim to the Thanos lists that are playing Batroc and Juggernaut and Cosmo, but there are some things to be concerned about there. Another thing to be concerned about is Mobius M Mobius, because in order for this deck to work, a lot of what it's trying to do is get some energy cheat happening, whether that be from Serra or Psylocke. Like, I think this deck sort of presages a lot of how other Thanos lists are trying to adapt right now. What this deck is doing is cheating energy really hard and saying, Thanos Fractured Frontier, you're a mid-range card, you're a good mid-range card, but if I'm just doing something fundamentally unfair, I'm going to go over the top of you, and you don't get to play as much interaction as you'd want because the nature of you as a card means that you're not going to necessarily have the ability to play the interactive tools that interact with me. And so this is more than being a Scorpion deck, really, is just sort of the blueprint for beating Thanos. It's do some kind of combo thing. That's what you do. Do something that adds up to way too many points, because Thanos is still, even if he is a vision that destroys something on your opponent's side of the board and discounts your entire hand and draws you a card, he's still like 12 points. And so if you're just doing something that's way, way, way bigger than that just doesn't care about 12 points and can play around getting something blown up, you do not care about the guy at all. Zapgaze Mani Devuti has once again won a Golden Gauntlet with Cerebro 3, and the premise here is almost the exact same. How do we make sure we don't care about Thanos? Well, we have way more points than them. It's cool that they played a card that was as good as Thanos is. Thanos is a great card. Thanos is a mid-range card. You know what's really good at beating mid-range decks? Combo decks. You know what's a really good combo deck? Cerebro 3. I'm actually going to have Mani on my Twitch channel on Monday at like 1 in the morning Eastern, but we'll be playing some games and filming a little bit of a video that'll probably go up on Tuesday here, so we'll have a good breakdown of this archetype, how to play it, what's things to be doing, and I think that that will hopefully help people get a good grasp on this. But Cerebro 3 is just a really good combo deck right now. You look at the other major combo deck, it's a deck that doesn't like seeing Luke Cage, and there's a ton of upside to just being a deck that is able to have both powerful bluff snaps and powerful real snaps. One of the things that I noticed Zapgaze doing a ton of was playing out a Cerebro on 3 if it would get him priority. So if, for example, you play a 1-drop on 1, a Sentinel on 2, Cerebro on 3, that will pretty often get you priority against a lot of the decks in this metagame, because a lot of them are playing like early scalers and aren't necessarily going to be able to prevent you from doing something like a Bastion on that Cerebro, which instantly ends the game, right? And so a lot of the snaps that I saw him making were either like, I'm going to have a billion Cerebros with that Bastion line, or I am going to do something that is so clearly powerful if I have the card Cerebro that my opponent just kind of has to retreat when I snap this game. And I think that both of those things are pretty important skills to Cerebro, and I'm not sure I necessarily have access to some of them, both because I think I'm a worse player and because I stream a lot of my gameplay, which means the bluff snap might not actually be there depending on what my opponents are being aware of. That said, it should be an exciting stream, and I hope you stop by to hopefully learn some things from the master. A deck that everyone seemingly stopped playing for no reason, Multiple Man Combo is absolutely phenomenal right now. It's just an extremely powerful deck that does extremely powerful stuff that can snap into basically anything. And as long as you spend a little bit of time thinking about what happens if Thanos has the Soul Stone, you are really not going to have a lot of trouble with that deck. They are going to have to make really good reads against you. You have a Cosmo that can go across multiple lanes. You have Cosmo Juggernaut if you're running into the various versions of the Scorpion combo deck, so you can make sure they never even actually get that Hazmat Lady Bullseye off, or maybe they never even are able to copy the Scorpion, or who knows what you're going to actually make happen there, but definitely you can make things happen. Your power output is immense. You are able to do a ton of extremely powerful stuff with good interaction. This is a deck that legitimately, what happened was Thanos came out, everyone decided I'm only playing Thanos decks, and for some reason stopped playing one of the single best decks in Marvel Snap. Nimrod is in a very similar situation to the Multiple Man combo deck in that it's just a very difficult deck to play against. I think you're going to beat most Thanos decks most of the time with a deck like this. I strongly suspect that if you have no idea what to play and you would like to beat Thanos and you would like to beat Thanos with a really easy deck to beat Thanos with, this is the move. Now, that's not a guarantee. Like I said, like the more interaction Thanos plays, the scarier this is. You don't like seeing Cosmos. You're never going to have priority. You really hate seeing Juggernauts. All of that stuff is real. If you're playing against the deck that's just like doing some fun little Thanos stuff, ooh, here's my 12 cards, you're going to beat them. You're going to beat them every time. This is one of the most on-rails, powerful, and straightforward decks. The real weakness of this deck is just when you're going into turn 6, your opponent's going to have priority, and they're going to be able to dictate turns to you, and that is a problem. But honest to God, this is just straight up probably one of the best decks in the game if you do not want to think a lot. There is just a lot to be said for a deck like this. Fundamentally, my view of the metagame right now is that it's largely split between Thanos decks and combo decks. And that seems like a little bit reductive because most Marvel Snap metagames are split between mid-range decks and combo decks because that's the two types of decks you really get in Marvel Snap. There's decks that play interaction and decks that don't. And we call the first kind mid-range and we call the second kind combo. And that's really kind of it. And so you end up with these like delineations that sort of make Thanos look like more than he is. But Thanos is definitely like the king of mid-range right now. But being the king of mid-range does not necessarily make you the best deck, especially when there's this many profitable options in the combo sector to go over the top. And I think even a deck like this succeeding in this world is demonstrative of the sacrifices that you have to make to play Thanos. Like, yes, Thanos is the king of mid-range in the sense that playing Thanos means you're going to win a lot of matchups against mid-range decks that aren't playing Thanos. But playing Thanos also means that you deck build a certain way. And it means that you don't necessarily have the stopgaps that you need to beat a lot of these combo decks. So Thanos, in a way, is sort of self-cannibalizing. What's going on is the Thanos mid-range decks are beating the mid-range decks that have interaction in them. And the less interaction you play, the better your matchup is going to be into the Thanos decks, right? Like you play less interaction, you play more points. That's the big dynamic we're talking about with like how people are building their Thanos decks right now. It's just like, I want to be the Thanos deck that has more points than the other Thanos decks. That's a great way to win Thanos mirrors. Really bad way to beat anything trying to combo. And I think trying to find that balance is part of why I like the double Thanos list that Hannah was playing. This is a deck, that's a deck that can actually like have some game into some combo decks and also still have enough raw power in it that it can go power to power with a lot of the other Thanos decks. And I think that it's very hard to find that balance in a lot of the other archetypes right now, which is a long way of saying this is a combo deck and you're going to beat everyone who doesn't play Mobius. And that's most people. From Gamer and Doc Guapo, we of course have the bounce list. This is a just solid baseline bounce deck that has a solid amount of points, no gimmicks, just some interesting point decisions as the game goes on. Bounce is an archetype that benefited pretty heavily from the Hawkeye buff, but I think the real star of these sort of bounce decks, and I think I almost regret not mentioning it when I was talking about Aurora. I am almost a believer that Iceman should be in over Hydra Bob, and Spider-Ham is one of the best cards in the game, but we can't play Spider-Ham in the bounce deck, so we're doing Iceman stuff instead. And I do think that, like, this is a really relevant thing when all of these low curve decks are running around. Like, yes, they're playing off the top of the deck, but they want to play off the top of the deck and also play cards in their hand. That's part of why Surge is so important to all these Thanos decks. So I think Iceman is, like, a really underrated card. Like, yeah, okay, they're playing off the top of the deck. It does matter still, though, because a lot of the time they have very specific cards they would like to get out of their hand alongside those cards on the top of the deck, and making them stop doing that is really, really good. Doubling Icemen by bouncing them, by playing them on Joaquin Torres, really, really strong. There's just a lot of meaningful disruption that you can get out of that. And of course, we have the ability to create the world's largest Hawkeyes. We're going to make such gigantic Hawkeyes, dude. One Piece would be jealous of the size of our Hawkeyes here. It is a very, very big one drop. Thanos-less Batroc, still a very functional deck. I think that the problem that this runs into is that it can be a little bit difficult to actually beat the Thanos decks, right? Like, if you're playing, the thing that Thanos is doing is making it pretty difficult to play other mid-range decks with a straight face, because you just sort of end up starting at a disadvantage unless you're having something that's really comboing off. And I think the thing you get when you play a version like this is you get a lot more equity into non-Thanos decks. You get your Iska, you get your Hellion repositioning, you get your Juggernaut Cosmo, right? Like you get your Mercury. There's a lot more space in the deck when you aren't locked into the Thanos deck building, but it is the kind of thing that can feel a little awkward when everyone else is playing Thanos and you just sort of feel like you're getting out muscled. Thanos is Magic the Gathering analogy, I guess, Thrag Tusk. He's just sitting on the board in front of you, and everything smaller than him just gets invalidated pretty hard. And so the format sort of becomes about these more things in that space or just going dramatically over the top of it. And I think that's sort of what's happening with Thanos here, but that's not to say that this is in any way a bad deck. Batroc is still Batroc. Before we go on the back end, a couple of other Thanos lists, just in case you were wondering what people were doing in these spaces. This one comes from Ralix, who was third place in the Golden Gauntlet yesterday. And I think a lot of what I like about it is that it is solving for a lot of the issues that I've talked about with Wiccan and a lot of the metagame issues that Thanos tends to have, which is you need big guys. You need numbers. If you're going to play a Wiccan deck, you cannot be playing things like speed and small boys or any of that stuff. What you have to be doing is playing guys that are enormously huge and are going to win lanes, and doubling up on the Psylocke Fractured Frontier with Thanos, getting the blink in here so you can go out and get a Fin Fang Foom out of the deck, the extra energy, the big guys, the Caliban, the stats. This just feels like a much more reasonable way to play Wiccan than the sort of Karen Pagey Venus things that were happening early on, because those don't have a lot of stats in them, and this does. And right now, the way that people are looking to solve Thanos mirrors is by getting more combo-y, getting more statsy, getting more big. And this is a really good way to approach sort of combo deck level output by just playing a lot of stats. You don't necessarily get there, but if you're going to play a Wiccan Thanos deck, I think this is far more attractive than any other build that I've seen. And last up, this Ika list that I think is extremely cute, and it's a very real way of building for Thanos upside. There's a lot of comps here between this list and the Butt Zombies list. I think both of them are building for explosiveness in the Thanos mirror, which is a super viable thing to be building for. I think it's a very correct decision to make right now exactly. I don't know if it'll be a correct decision to make going forward, because in order to build for that explosiveness in the Thanos mirror, you're really losing out on a lot of ability to deal with other spaces, other combo decks. I don't know what you're supposed to do against Nimrod. I watched Ika play that matchup. I think, frankly, that it's like 70-30 to his opponent. He played very well in that matchup, but still, like, there are just a lot of things where it's like, I don't know what the hell you're supposed to do about Nimrod. I don't know what the hell you're supposed to do about Cerebro. You just got to figure it out. What Ika ended up doing to beat the Nimrod was randomly generating a Valentina null. I don't think that's a realistic option for your game plan in a matchup. I have some doubts about this deck in most things that are not Thanos mirrors, but I do think it's very solid to just be like, oh, you're playing Thanos? I'm also playing Thanos, and I'm cheating double the energy you are. And I think that's reasonable, right? Like, Mobius is also just a card that's pretty good against other Thanos decks. Like, the Greenstone's really, really strong. And we've sort of moved from versions of Thanos that are built around the Redstone to versions of Thanos that are built around the Greenstone. And that's sort of where we are now, because the metagame is trying to be tall to win Thanos mirrors. This definitely can do it, but you're really selling out to do so. All right, so basically it's mid-range, which is mostly Thanos, and combo decks, which mostly beat Thanos. The big question is, will people start actually playing them? I don't know that combo decks are a particularly satisfying gameplay experience, both in terms of playing them and playing against them. It's very, do you have it? Oh, I guess they have it. Oh, that's not super fun. Meanwhile, Thanos is a blast. He has like 7 different decks that he goes in. They're all cool. They're all different. I don't know that I expect people to make smart decisions about this, right? Because I think smart decisions would be playing Scorpion, playing Multiple Man, playing maybe Cerebro 3, playing something that you're very confident into Thanos with, but it seems like a lot of people are instead just saying, I'm going to play a Thanos deck that beats the other Thanos decks because it's awesome and it's fun and because rank doesn't really matter. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And I respect that. I just want to be clear that I do think there's a lot of just sort of money being left on the table, so to speak, by people's unwillingness to do this combo deck stuff, because I do think it's very, very solid. As always, I've been KMBest, you've been phenomenal, and I'll see you in the next one.